Welcome back to Reinvention Real Talk. Today's guest is someone who lives in that exact space. Toby Brooks is a professor, coach, and host of Becoming Undone, where he works with high achievers navigating identity shifts, transitions, and the emotional weight of their past. He blends mindset science, storytelling, and strategic coaching to help people stop carrying their past as a burden and start using it as a foundation for growth. And today we're diving into something deeply human. Why is it so hard to let go? And what does it actually take to move forward without dragging your past with you? Welcome, Toby, to Reinvention Real Talk. I am so excited to have you on.
Karen, it's awesome. Thank you for that super kind introduction. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Now, Toby, let's start here. I want to go into the hidden cost of holding on, because most people think they've moved on, but they haven't. From your work with high achievers, how does the past quietly continue to control people even when they believe they have let go?
It's kind of a loaded question, Karen. You're coming out guns blazing. I appreciate that.
That's what we do here.
I think, we're just jumping right in. I think the key for me is that I always say this. I don't want to be a year older. I want to be a year better. Mm-hmm. And with that comes this mentality that I might think I have it all figured out. And I don't know about you, but I've discovered this in this podcasting space where I'm going to do my absolute best to put the best episode I can together. And then when I go back and listen to something even 6 months ago, I'm like, wow, I had no idea. And I've grown so much, So we always kind of come at this from the perspective of I'm going to do my best. And if I'm growing the way I should, hopefully my best is almost laughable a year from now. Mm-hmm. And my best will continue to get better. And so I think the hard part for me and for a lot of people who, if you'll allow me to include myself as a high achiever, is the perfectionist mindset can oftentimes rob us of the joy in that moment. And we kind of move forward, always kind of othering or asterisking, if that's even a word, our best. And we don't give ourselves the space and the grace to say, this is my best, but tomorrow will be better.
And now, what are subtle signs that someone is still emotionally tied to their past?
I think that comes out in a lot of ways. For me, it could be insecurity. Mm-hmm. It has been taking offense to things when no offense was intended. I think assuming best intent from whether it's family or friends or colleagues is a healthier approach. It's not always the easy approach. But a lot of times I can move forward in a relationship or in an arrangement, and it's clear that I haven't moved beyond it because the emotion is right near the surface. And so emotional intelligence would tell us we want to respond, we don't want to react. And I think frequently if we haven't really dealt with that past or whatever that offense was that we've perceived, we react. And the emotion is right near the surface. And so when I check that and see that in my own spirit, I know that there's work to be done. And lots of times I can take offense when none was intended.
Mm-hmm. It is very hard, especially like you said, like something that may have happened, even for myself, tell myself, hold on, Karen, no, you're in the present, let that go. What lesson did you learn? And move on. But it is a process. It's taken a while to be able to do that and to move forward. But I know people personally, people very close to me, people that I love very much that just can't let go of their past, and it really hinders their future and just on what they're living in their present. And it's a sad situation if you can't let go of your past. It really is. Now, Toby, do you think that success can actually mask unresolved pain?
Oh, absolutely. Let's be real. I'm working on my 6th college degree. Mm-hmm. I started the 5th one when my son was graduating from high school. He was in his last season of baseball. It had been something that we had done, and as he grew, it was something that I watched. Mm-hmm. And I just really didn't want to have to deal with how that season in my family's life was changing. And so part of me probably signed up for that MBA just so I could keep my mind off of it. And Yeah, I'm in a lot of ways, I'm avoiding the problem, but the perfectionist and the high achiever within me would say, well, if you can divert that energy into something productive, then it's still good, right? And so, I mean, when I look back on it, I know that I grew and I know that I'm better for that process. But if I'm really honest about it, and I even knew it at the time, it was a way of kind of circumventing the hard work and the heavy lift of dealing with, wow, like my youngest is leaving the nest. And what does that mean for me as a dad? And other people might turn to a bottle. I would turn to sign up for another class.
Oh, wow. I'm going to be there in a year. My youngest is going to graduate high school. And as a single mom, my life has been my two children, and I don't even know what I'm going to, and I have so much going on in my life, but I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself at that point. It's like my baby. So I can completely relate to you.
It really does feel like you're watching almost like a car accident in slow motion. Like I knew the emotional weight was going to land on me, and there's nothing I could do about it.
Yes.
But you know, in that process, I would look for a way to cope, and for me, that's what that was.
Yeah, that's probably the route I'm going to take. I just go ahead and head first into things too, to forget things, but definitely. Now, Toby, you talk about identity being stripped away. Why do people cling so tightly to the old version of themselves, even when those identities no longer serve them?
Oh, such a good question. In my conversations with high achievers, lots of times they have spent the bulk of their memorable life, some from the age of 3 and on, gymnasts who started in gymnastics before they were in school. And when that's suddenly done, it's so jarring to kind of think about the what next. And I call those purpose storms, where we're stripped of what has been the goal and the purpose for so long. And then we're either faced with the reality of, if I don't fill it at all, now I'm just kind of wandering through without any kind of direction, or I move on to what's next. And that's really where the name of my podcast came from, Becoming Undone, going from unraveling and feeling like we've been pulled apart to realizing that I've got a purpose left unfulfilled. And whether that's parenting, and I've successfully gotten my youngest across the finish line, and now what does our relationship look like? And now maybe I can pour into other people's kids in a way I couldn't before. That's a purpose left unfulfilled. Maybe it's writing that I wasn't able to focus on with other pursuits. So looking at it for me from the perspective of, if that identity has been stripped away, sometimes it makes room for something even greater. And parenting, probably a bad example, but in my case, you know, sports, poured a lot of time and energy into being an athlete, and then that transitioned into working in sports medicine, and then that turned into other opportunities to serve people outside of sport. But if I would have held on to that identity the entire time, kind of the old saying is, you can't hold new things if your hands are already full of old. And so we have to put those things down so that we can pick up new, bigger, better, perhaps more impactful things.
Yes. I don't know if you've seen that meme it goes around in social media, that you see one side of the slide has one rose and it says my plan, and then the other side, it either says God's or the universe's plan, and it's like 100 roses overflowing. So sometimes, like you said, we've got to let go of that past, because we don't know what comes better. You know, much better always usually comes and takes place. Now, do you think that people cling so tightly to that old version? Do you think because it's ego? Is it fear? Is it survival?
I think for me, it's familiarity. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And if all I've known is I poured my time, energy, my talents, my resources into being a basketball player, that was my story up through high school. And I so desperately wanted to play college basketball. If that opportunity doesn't materialize, you've still got time, you've still got resources, you've still got the ability to do other things, but you've for so long poured it into that one bucket that you don't know what else you can do with it. And that's what I love about this work is so many great transferable skills are learned, whether it's in sport or college or whatever else. Entrepreneurs frequently, like serial entrepreneurs, go from one startup to another, and they oftentimes will tell you, I make all new mistakes. I don't make the same mistake twice. Well, that means that formation is happening. Growth is happening. And with the question of identity, I'm frequently, I just don't know what I don't know. And it takes sometimes a feeling out process, a trial and error, in order to figure out, like, yeah, it wasn't meant for me to play college basketball, but because of what I learned in that season of life, I can apply it in this season of life.
In that season of life, yeah. But I think someone has to get to that point, to be that recognized, because some of them just can't let go of that past. And I think it may be a form of grief. Maybe they don't recognize that.
100%. I think, very often, I think we do kind of have that season where we don't want to move forward because it almost seems like you're disrespecting what lay behind. In the case of parenting, like, there's nothing that I am prouder of than the two human beings that grew up in my home and the humans that they're becoming. And there's a part of me that, like, if I move on to the next thing, am I disrespecting that season and saying that it wasn't as important? No, not at all. I'm honoring it.
Yes, I love it. So that's a great way of seeing it, because I feel the same way you do. I always say that my children are my Oscars, they're my Grammys, they're my People's Choice Awards, they're my everything I could ever want in life, my PhD, they're everything to me. And it is, you do feel like, am I disrespecting that season of my life? I want to go a layer deeper. Let's go into the neuroscience of letting go. Okay, so I want to go deeper into the science of what happens in the brain when we replay past experiences, regrets, or failures. Why do you think some people loop their past more than others?
Yeah. For me, it maybe it's an oversimplification, but I always tend to kind of navigate or gravitate toward Carol Dweck's work in mindset and growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And the notion that in a fixed mindset, I achieve success and I like how success feels. And so encountering something new or challenging that's unlikely to be met with success is not I'm going to avoid that. Instead, I want to continue to do things that I know I can be successful at. If I'm really locked in on the fixed mindset and I get great grades in 5th grade and I don't want to go to 6th grade, I just want to keep doing 5th grade for the rest of my life. Well, yeah, you could be really successful as a 5th grader when you're 30 years old, but have you grown? No, not at all. We know that's a silly example, right?
Yeah.
But the growth mindset would say, I'm not concerned with the outcome. I'm concerned with the process. And am I formed through failure? Yeah, absolutely. So I don't run from things that are challenging. I run at them. And within that, our mind is, especially for a young, oftentimes athlete, but student, they're forming their motor skills. They're forming their language skills. There's so much plasticity in the brain at that early age. And if they are avoiding things that are challenging, there will come a time when that window of opportunity starts to narrow. If I want to learn a new language at my age, I'm definitely going to have an audible accent. I might be able to pick up that language, but you'll be able to tell that I wasn't a native speaker. Whereas if a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old, if they're raised in a bilingual household, they'll be native because they're plastic at that time. Their brain is able to conceptualize and retain and grow neural connections in a way that they can't when they're older. And so part of the reason we want to encourage that growth mindset is take advantage of that plasticity, whether that's an athlete learning how to move better and be more athletic, or a student who's learning things, acquiring things like language or other concepts.
Now, let's talk about the myth of closure, okay? Because people talk about closure all the time. So we talked about them not being able to let go, how they should let go, and how neurologically sometimes we can't let go. But I want to talk about closure, because people talk about it all the time, but in real life, closure does not always come easy. So how do you think we can make peace with your past when there is no apology, no resolution, and no clear ending. What advice would you give to those people?
Yeah, I don't know that it's great advice, but I'll tell you what works for me. I'm an Enneagram 8. I don't play unless I have a chance to win or keeping score. I want to dominate. All those things about success that athleticism and sport kind of baked into my personality. So for me, closure comes from just winning. Like if you said I can't, I'll show you I can. And that's changed. Sometimes that's okay. I didn't get the promotion, but I went somewhere else, and I grew in that regard. I had a college professor my freshman year, and I was considering pre-medicine, pre-physical therapy. At the time, you basically needed a 4.0 to get into either of those. At least that's what I had been told. And so I'm in this Calc 1 class, and I go in, and the professor says, "What are you majoring in?" And I say, "Oh, I'm thinking pre-med or physical therapy." And he looked me dead in my eye and he said, "Well, what are you going to change it to?" And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Well, you're not going to get an A in my class. You'll most likely get a B or worse. What are you going to change your major to?" And in that moment, like I'm 18 years old and I'm just like, I want to tell this guy, but I'm being respectful. And so I left, and I was just devastated that someone would say that to me, like all my plans for the future weren't going to happen. Yeah. But that one interaction lit a fire under me in a way that him patting me on the back to say, "Oh, you're not the best student in class, but everything will be fine." So a lot of, I wouldn't say all of my academic pursuits were because of that, but things like that I can latch on to. Is there closure? Once I got my PhD, did I go back and tell him, like, "I showed you"? No, that didn't happen. But I will say, years later, I was actually, this sounds like a brag. I didn't intend for this, but I was honored as the alumnus of the year. And that same professor came up and shook my hand and he said, "Congratulate." Like I really didn't expect this. He was apologetic in some ways, but he remembered the interaction as well. So sometimes we get the benefit of that actual closure. Other times, like sometimes people just don't see that they've wronged us. Other people are unrepentant and they just don't care that they wronged us. But that's for them. Like forgiveness isn't for you. If you've wronged me, forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me. Yes. And I don't have to drag around the skeletons of that wronging for the rest of my life. Why would I? I'm just weighing myself down in that journey.
Yes, amen to that, Toby, because it's like taking your own poison. I have given that advice over and over, and I think closure is something that we create if we don't receive it. And again, it is for us. Yeah, it's not for the other person.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Now, Toby, you integrate storytelling into your work. How important is the story we tell ourselves about our past?
Ooh, another good one. I just wrote this today. Henry Ford quote: "Whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're probably right." Yeah. And when I think about that in terms of my faith, even, am I a sinner who has been redeemed, or am I a saint who happens to sin? There's a big difference in the approach to that. If I can perceive myself as, what I believe is that I am who I am through Christ, and that's a saint. Okay. That doesn't mean I'm not going to screw up and do things wrong and all that. Yeah. But I find that was revolutionary in my thinking. If I go into any encounter assuming that I'm going to mess up, guess what happens? I mess up. Yeah. Whereas if I go in assuming that, hey, I got this, this is in the bag, I'm much more likely to find success. That doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect. Again, it goes to that growth mindset. But along with that is this idea that I'm going to rise to the challenge of the expectation, not fall to the level of who I think I am at my base.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Now, Toby, do you think two people can live the same experience and create completely different identities from it?
Yeah, I think so. I won't wax too philosophical on you there, but It's amazing to me, even seeing my two kids, like they were raised in the same home by the same people. We had the same budget, like everything about that experiment was controlled. And one is an opera singer and the other one's training to be a mathematician. And, you know, there's just that experience just illustrated to me that we're all wired a little differently. We're all created differently. And what we gravitate toward and what we move away from is very individualized. And so I try to have that same grace with my students. Like just because I presented it all in the same way doesn't mean it's going to land all in the same way. And so some students may struggle with one concept more than others. I just have to provide it in as many different ways as I can so that hopefully they can catch it one way or the other.
It's like they say, siblings are all raised in the same household. They're completely different upbringings, even though you're raised the exact same way. Now, Toby, you mentioned something powerful, and when I was doing research on you, you say people suffering in silence when their identity no longer fits. Why is this especially common in high achievers?
I think far too often we have this, we won't embrace this idea of sunk cost. That's definitely something that I learned in my MBA program that kind of spilled over into other things. Like if I've invested time and energy and resources into being this certain thing, there's some grief and there's some regret associated with abandoning that plan. And so if I'm not careful, excuse me, if I'm not cautious, I may stay down a path that's no longer serving me just because I've got so much invested in it. It's like if I would have had, you know, $1 million invested in Polaroid, I'll just pick, or Blockbuster, you know, if I just kind of didn't look at the data and I just tried to power through because like, well, you know, there was a time when Blockbuster stock was valuable and I'm going to stick this out. Ultimately, that doesn't, the data doesn't support that anymore. I should have invested in something else. My slowness to act or my inability to really read the data and make a data-informed decision would, in that case, cost me money. In the case of someone who's still clinging to an identity that isn't serving them, like we said, you can't hold old things and new things with the same hands. And so it can be a real struggle to let go of something, but it's necessary. I knew I wasn't going to be a Division I athlete. I could have continued to pursue that and invested money in personal training and nutrition and all those things, but ultimately it wasn't going to be successful. The better approach was to figure out how could I go from where I was to the next thing as opposed to staying, following a bad line in something that wasn't meant for me.
Yeah, so sometimes success actually traps people in their outdated identities, almost. Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought of this as there's like a ransom. If you have the wiring to be an entrepreneur, but you find yourself in a job, there's a dollar amount that will trip the lever. Okay, if I only made $6 an hour in my job, it wouldn't take much for me to find a way to replace that income and pursue my entrepreneur heart. But if I'm making $250,000, then the ransom for that freedom is much, much higher, and I'm much less likely to abandon that salary and pursue what I think is good. The question becomes like, what's your number? Like, what is the number with which you'll leave that job and pursue your heart? And, you know, I would love to be a full-time content creator and podcaster, but I don't want to leave the job. I've got the heart of someone's employee and the head of an entrepreneur, and that can create some real challenges sometimes.
Tell me about it. Yes. Now, talking about your podcast, so your podcast is called Becoming Undone, which that is such a powerful phrase. What does it actually mean to become undone?
I love the question. So this actually came about during COVID. I was teaching a behavioral medicine class for master students in our athletic training program. And we were all sheltering in place and teaching remotely. We had pivoted to that. And I could tell they were checking out. They were struggling. I mean, perhaps their own mental health. They were depressed, anxious. I was. And we had the syllabus, and we're trying to slog along and get through. And I just decided then and there, like, I got to do something different. So I convened a panel of former athletes that I had worked with at Arizona, a couple of gymnasts, a football player, a baseball player, basketball player. And I had them just come on and talk about their separation from sport and what it was like when they left, the field or the gym for the last time. And these were people in their early 40s. I mean, they had had a fair amount of distance between the end of their career and this interview. And it was so powerful and so emotional and just a lot of unprocessed grief and reflections. And, I thought it would go an hour. We went 3 hours, and they just shared their heart. Tears were shed by students, by participants. And in that moment, I realized, like, there's something to this. As an athletic trainer, I work with athletes who are on our roster. They're enrolled in school. But when they graduate or when they transfer or when they're done with eligibility, I really don't serve them anymore as a healthcare provider. And these are people who are most vulnerable. Like, that is traumatic to be a gymnast from the from the age of 3 until you're 22, and now suddenly one day it just quits. It's done. It's over. And so I realized then and there that there's something to this. It's not unique to athletes. Entrepreneurs go through it. Artists go through it. High achievers of all sorts. Military, for sure. Like, your entire career is wrapped up in who you are and the job that you have. And if that changes, what do we do with it? So the title just kind of bubbled up organically. The idea that when my life is, when I'm kind of sifting through the wreckage of the dreams I thought I had, like, I've been pulled apart. I'm undone. And then those who are most successful, they're able to kind of put those pieces back together in a way that says that they have a purpose left unfulfilled, that they are undone, they're unfinished. Behind me, you see this plate. It's a kintsugi. It's Japanese. It's art that is broken, pottery oftentimes, and it's glued back together with gold. And what results is even more beautiful than what was there to begin with. And this idea that I can go from being in shatters and, in pieces to having a purpose left unfulfilled. And that's really what the show has allowed me to do, is have conversation after conversation with people from all walks of life who have had a similar journey through identity shift. Yeah.
Now, do you think that someone can reinvent themselves without first becoming undone, or is that process, that uncomfortable process, necessary?
Yeah. Part of me says jealously, if someone's able to do that, how great that would be. But one of my favorite quotes is, "A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor." There's something formative in the coming undone that means I get to be put back together, perhaps in a stronger or more effective or more beautiful way than I was before I encountered it. We wouldn't have chosen the adversity or the failure or the setback, but it made us better for the pursuit.
Yes. Yeah. Now, let's give our listeners a practical path to peace. So I want to make this tangible for them. If someone is carrying regret, pain, or attachment to their past, what are the first real steps, or at least the first step they can take to start making peace with it?
Yeah. I like to keep it simple. I say strategic and purpose, relentless in pursuit, better every day. The strategic and purpose is, you got to name it. You have to kind of start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey would say, and you reverse engineer from there. If I know that it's a job I want, then I start there. I'll use AI a lot of times just for some feedback and some game planning. Like, if I want to be an expert in pedagogy-related AI in 12 months, walk me through a month-by-month plan of what I need to do between now and then in order to become that thing. And so if it's just more internal, and it's like, I want to be able to forgive my dad for never going to my sport events, or I want to be able to forgive that teacher who said that thing to me. Maybe it's a little less expansive as all that, but it's inner work, and it's I'm gonna I'm going to pray for that person every day for the next 30 days. I want to see how I feel about them at the end of that. Or maybe it is journaling, or maybe it is something practical that I have control of. The yes or the no of whether or not that got done is 100% within my decision making for the day. That's the strategic and purpose. The relentless in pursuit, I say every decision I make is driven by data, and data is not right or wrong. It's just data. And if I can say, I like to build my growth plan around Luke 2:52, Jesus grew in wisdom, stature, favor with God and man, mental, physical, spiritual, social. When I'm on and I'm doing things well, I'm reading in a book every day. That's the mental. I'm working out and fueling my body right. That's the physical. I'm praying or reading or whatever. That's the spiritual. And then the social, I'm going to reach out to friends. And the check boxes of those things is a very simple thing. Did I do what I said I was going to do? Is that, excuse me, is that a daily thing? Is that a 4 times a week thing? Whatever. So I've got a habit tracker on my phone. I've done 75 hard a few times where you just check off, you do those things or you don't. But those are all just kind of practical ways to say, I'm going to plot my course. And once I've done a good job with that, it's really just a did I do it, did I not? It's a checkbox. It's a streak. It's a motivational tool. And if I've got a friend along on the journey, we're holding each other accountable. My son and I have kind of started this, but not really in earnest, where we've got this habit tracker and we say at the end of the day, once you finish it, screenshot it, send it to me. I'll know you did it. You'll know I did it. And we can hold each other accountable.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, it is great if you have someone holding you accountable and, your little team, teammate together.
Yeah.
Sure, it makes it a little bit easier. Toby, let's talk about the hidden gift in the past, okay? So I'm going to give you one final deep question before we close this out. I've just been giving them to you left and right.
All good.
But what if the past we're trying to escape is actually the thing that was meant to shape our purpose? How can we help someone shift from why did this happen to me to how is this shaping me?
Yeah, love this question. I've been helping out over at Baylor football doing some observations in the weight room, and they have, most weight rooms have signs of like motivational stuff, t-shirt quotes, I say. And there's one that I love, and it says, what now, what next? And the idea is like adversity is going to happen. Like I'm going to encounter something that is coming between me and my goal. And that could be getting a first down or winning a game or finishing an assignment, whatever that is. What now? And what next speaks to, okay, I'm going to deal with that and then on to the next thing. If I'm dwelling constantly on how I failed the last play or the last game or the last season, it's undermining my likelihood of success for the next one. And so far too often, I think perfectionists tend to be their own worst enemies. They'll beat themselves up. They'll reconstruct conversations and criticize themselves. I should have said this, or why didn't I do that? And that undermines our likelihood of success for the next one. So I love the simplicity of that model. And it's one that hopefully we'll embrace as a team and be successful. But even if not, like those are life skills that those guys are getting.
Yes. Oh, I love everything. I've loved this conversation, Toby. It's been intellectual. I've loved it. So many gems dropped here. Now, where, for those that are listening to us, where can they connect with your work, your coaching, your podcast? Where can they find you, Toby?
Oh, I appreciate that. The podcast is on all the platforms, but you can go to the website, unDonepodcast.com. My website, personal, is Toby Brooks, PhD. Frankly, I hate the PhD on the end, but someone else had bought there's another Toby Brooks that got the domain and some of the socials. So all the socials are... all the socials are Toby Brooks PhD, whether that's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the normal sources. So I'm happy to help in any way. There's also an app that I have now called scienceofthecomeback.com. It'll redirect to an AI-driven app that will walk you through the strategic and purpose, relentless in pursuit, better every day kind of mindset.
Okay, I love that. And your podcast is on all the platforms?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to be listening to those, make sure that you subscribe to Toby's podcast, which is fantastic. Toby, last question. I ask my guests, this is a signature question of Reinvention Real Talk. So this is the last question I ask every single one of my guests. In one word, what does reinvention mean to you?
Possibility.
Possibility, okay. Do you want to elaborate on why possibility?
Yeah, I think far too often we sell ourselves short. And I was just a farm kid who grew up in rural Illinois, first generation college kid. I went to a community college, and now I'm a professor at Baylor, and I'm pursuing another degree. Like there's so much about what I'm doing today that 16-year-old me just would not believe that I get the chance to do. And so reinvention has meant that there's always a next step. There's always an opportunity to grow and get better. I don't want to be a year older. I want to be a year better. And so everything about reinvention to me says there's a possibility.
I love that. Thank you, Toby, for joining us on Reinvention Real Talk. It truly was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Karen. It's my pleasure being here.
Thank you. Now, listeners, if this episode resonated with you, I want you to sit with this. What part of your past are you still carrying that it is time to release? Because reinvention isn't about becoming someone new. It's finally about making peace with who you've been. If you've loved this episode, share it with someone who needs it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Remember, your past may shape you, but it does not have to define you. As always, I am Karen Larrea, and I will see you on the next episode of Reinvention Real Talk.